I was thinking that going over some, well, important classical games, like, Grandmaster Feingold here immediately seen the game and immediately recognized the idea, the topic, because we grow up on those things. It's like those classical games, they what make better players. I do quite a lot of commentary on ICC, and I get to discuss chess with some, I wouldn't say the best players in the world, but very experienced, strong grandmasters, which sometimes can be more interesting and even more educational than, with Caruana, which is a young kid, player number, I don't know, 8, 10, 14 in the world now. I think he dropped like 8 spots. But one of the things that I believe almost everyone agrees is that each generation in chess, just by definition, is stronger than the other in absolute terms. Just because you really know what happened before, like you really have an idea what were the inventions that Fischer brought to chess, and then which position Karpov played that people didn't think they can play, and then Kasparov with whatever his opening preparation, and each time Kramnik, Carlsen, they are, especially, these days Carlsen, but each time we see new things, like genius great players 100 years ago, many people write that they would not be, I don't know, what would you say, Ben? What would the level of the first world champion Steinitz be today?
Man, we were discussing that last week when I was in Michigan.
Okay.
Not very good.
2000, right? 2100.
That doesn't happen.
But some said,
Not good. They played over the games with Shigora. It was very suspicious.
Exactly. I remember John Nunn, one of the brightest, in general, brightest everything to do in chess, like went over some old games and said many of the competition were less than like club players, like 2000 or around it. Amazing. Maybe Capablanca and Alekhine and all those started to be really strong. Of course, in relative terms, well, maybe they're better than Carlsen, but again, it's relative terms. In absolute terms, we always have to study classical games. And one of the things that I can speak for myself that, well, I wish I had done more, that I should, be thankful is going over many games, especially, I don't know, I have a big spot in my heart for Karpov. I always thought that, maybe Tal games are much more entertaining, but, to study from Tal games, I actually would not recommend. You want to have fun, yeah, you can go and see Tal games and many others, but if you want to study, you need to have someone that you can really understand what he is doing. Well, Karpov, I think everyone can reasonably understand. So I want to show some games. I actually, let's say one full game, maybe the other one will be 1.5, 2 games, including Kasparov, Karpov, and then I want to show, one quick game that actually basically was very important for me to become Grandmaster. Basically, just duplicating idea by Kasparov. All I had to do, well, not all, but huge part was to remember what Kasparov did and how it will affect my game. Helped me become Grandmaster. So this is a game in the second match, technically, played in 1985. The first match with big drama and stories and whatever was stopped, and then our two heroes play the second match in Moscow, restricted to 24 games, the best out of 24. So at that time, Kasparov was much more into the very classical Queen's Gambit decline. Little bit after it, he changed already to, well, mostly I believe that King's Indian came in 1990, Grunfeld was in 1987, Nimzo Indian, of course, was, actually, that was one that Karpov played more often, but the classical lines were played in many of the previous match and this one. Okay. Pretty much most classical approach. When Black want to play World Championship matches, this is an opening that we've seen forever. I think the Capablanca Eliochin match basically seen this with White and Black huge amount of the games. Well, in 2010, in the last game, the score was 5.5, 5.5 to Topalov Anand. Anand plays Black. No something spectacular, no Grunfeld, nothing too ambitious. A draw is perfect score. he played the Lasker variation, which goes after h6. I can actually show it on chess base. This way, and knight e4. Very, very solid line, one of the most solid lines. Black basically wants to exchange the bishops, then he wants to exchange the knights, then at the right moment he will capture, play b6, c5, exchange those. The position is as equalish as possible. Topalov was pushing way too much and actually lost last game of a World Championship match with white pieces, which I don't really remember when it happened. I think it never happened to lose last game with white pieces. But very solid approach.
Karpov lost to Kasparov in the last game.
Yes, but he had to win, exactly. And amazingly enough, a year earlier, Kasparov won. Had to win.
Yeah.
And actually, this is, to me, one of the most impressive games ever. I will just say, because if Ben mentioned those titles, and he's correct. When you're down, I count it less that Karpov had to win, because, well, you have to win. But Kasparov's approach a year earlier was just, I think, unbelievable. You know, someone has to have those nerves. You have to win. Karpov in 87 went and played Sicilian. In 85. Kasparov after it played a solid long game as possible. Knight f3, c4, b3, getting nothing but just keeping the game out of theory, and won. Okay, so we're having a very, very simple, solid line. We don't need to analyze much of the opening. Basically, white, very quickly speaking, white is easily giving his dark color bishop. Okay, he has the pawn chain. Black has the problem with the bishop on c8, so at some point c5 would make a lot of sense. Knight a6, rook d1, well, basically preparing against c5. c5 was played, and take. Queen a5, take. Well, actually somewhat resembles Grunfeld in some, at least the idea, but okay, now queen d2. What would happen if white decides that he just wants to, let's say, capture? What would be a reasonable move for black? Well, knight e4 is possible, but maybe after knight e4, knight to d4. I think I will just block it this way. And I think.
I would take the knight. I would play queen take.
Oh, immediately, right? Yeah. Knight a4. Yeah. Knight a4. Now I will go this way. Yeah, I was just thinking anyway I'm going to block the diagonal, not even looking, you know, just to. I don't think there is much continuation. I think just bishop take is excellent for black. I mean, it's just one tiny pawn, and a2 is hanging, rook c8. I mean, this is, I feel, way more than enough. No compensation. Black is just going to get the pawn back pretty much immediately. It's white that is already worse here, probably. Okay, so queen d2. Well, what to make of this move? First of all, what should we play if, let's say, a move like simple bishop e2 is being played in this position? This is the first interesting question. How to continue here? Because when we look at a game, you know, and I'm going back long time, I had a Karpov book that was in Russian, and I don't speak Russian, and it was actually very interesting. You know, I learned how the letters in the Russian are, and I could make up the names. I could make up maybe tiny bit more than the names just because of this book. But really, I have to think for myself, which, well, I don't do very often, but I did it at that time. So I have to think, okay, what happens if white plays most simple move, right? I want to play bishop e2 and develop. Take on c3?
No,
On d5. Yeah, that's possible. I don't think I want to take back because bishop e6 and so on. Yeah, maybe I will play knight d4. Or, you know, maybe first castle, let's say. Either castle or knight d4. I think both are possible. What now? Yeah, this I think is a very good move. Because it messes up white pawn structure and black is just going to be okay. Without this move, white will be better if he will get to play knight d4 on the next move. Well, just tiny bit blockade and the pawn is weak. Bishop takes c3 is okay, and white will have a weak pawn on c3, black will have a weak pawn on d5. Everyone is either happy or unhappy, however you want to look at that. So this is a possibility. I also think that now this idea might look much more reasonable. Attacking this one, of course, we capture with the check, and now knight d4, I can just capture and maybe capture. Just a possibility. Have to be a bit careful here, but I think it's a possibility. For example, in this continuation, I would still be a tiny bit careful with black because the bishop there is really not that pretty, but okay, that's at least an idea. Maybe black can just move and some ideas of e4, e5, e4. Black can always also just take and take here and reasonably be solid because white will have this weak spot. So Kasparov played queen d2. Basically, he doesn't want to discuss those ideas too much. And black played rook d8. There are some other ideas here for black. One other idea that I remember coming from some line in the Ragozin opening is to play this way. To take. White pretty much has to take with the queen. Take, 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 take. And now b6. And black is a pawn down, but he has usually supposed to get a lot of compensation against those two. It's a matter of style and whatever anyone likes. I mean, many positions this is supposed to be at least playable for black. He's a pawn down, but enough play. This is one big decision. Okay. Rook d8 was played. So now Karpov wants to be able maybe to take and not even give the pawn. Knight d4. Okay, no more bishop take on the table. Last possibility was a move before. Okay, so after all some theoretical ideas, we get this position. Nothing too dramatic, right? Black has isolated pawn, he has pair of bishops. Obviously this is a bad, well, it's supposed to be his bad bishop. Maybe somewhat favorable for white, but nothing too dramatic here. Knight e4. So, of course, black is, I think, happy, very happy with capture. No longer isolated pawn. It opens a lot of pressure against d4. Well, Karpov doesn't really want to play this. Take, take. Okay. And bishop e6. By the way, I'm not totally certain about that idea, but okay. Queen c2. Okay. So how should white play here? Let's say that white get to play the next 3-4 moves. Well, what would be reasonable? Few more moves for white in this position. Just what would be our plan?
Try to pile up on the d5 pawn.
So you would maybe thinking about doubling the rooks on the d file, at some point bishop f3, maybe throw some healthy, I don't know, g3 there. In such position, sometimes I might prefer g3 over h3 just because, well, I have a pretty light color bishop. Just an idea. Okay. Rook c7, rook d2, you know. We don't need to be Karpov to understand that we want to go in that direction. Now it is very interesting. This move, you know, this is one of the, Ben mentioned it just when we started. This is one of those most unbelievable games that I don't think that many people really understood or thought how to play so much on opposite color bishops and the weaknesses of some of them. If I'm not mistaken, and you know we have absolutely no analysis, so we have this game, plain game. I think that after rook d1, some ideas that were mentioned were to take rook to c2, and black position is, maybe, I'm not even certain if it is worse, because maybe if rook d2, maybe bishop f5. I mean, just thinking about such an idea. If take, rook c2, I think rook d2 is pretty much forced, and then maybe something like that. It looks pretty reasonable for black, no? I think so. I think this is something that makes sense. And if not, even if not, maybe after some capture, it's not that horrible, but I think I like this bishop f5 idea. But basically, white has then a big decision what to do, because really black wants to take and go here. For example, if the position was tiny different, white might have thought to play slower. For example, if white bishop was on b3, it would be nicer because the bishop on b3 covers this square, put immediate pressure against d5. Also, then white can consider playing slower. But so Karpov took, and black took with the pawn. You know, I remember a game. It was played in London, I think 2009. I think London 2009, between Kramnik with the white pieces and Adams was black. Well, maybe we can see this game. Maybe I can pause for a second and we can get to see this game, just the position. The reason why I mention it was interesting. Kasparov took with the pawn. But let's assume that black takes with the queen, which seems a bit suspicious. But how should the game continue after take with the queen?
Bishop d1, bishop d2.
Okay, bishop d1, or bishop f3, or any other ideas. Okay. What should black play here? It's not very easy, I think, but rook c1. Okay, but rook c1, queen d3. I'm not even looking for tactical ideas, just very principle.
d4.
d4. I mean, if you allow bishop here, that's really bad. It's not just the pawn down. It's not just the pawn down. It's f7 is weaker. I mean, those positions have been played and they're really, really, really bad. Like, just know it's a pawn down and weak king and everything around it. But something like d4. And let's say queen d6. Okay, if we ignore, or maybe white has some more pressure on f7. If black can get g6, king g7, it's probably very close to just be really, really, really okay. Kasparov took with the pawn. Now, we know that in many Tarrasch positions, we are not necessarily wanting to take. And by the way, in the earlier match, in 84-85, actually Tarrasch was Kasparov's main system, at least at the start of the match. He actually suffered quite a lot. But white very rarely want to take, because taking is, well, improving this pawn and fixing, well, protecting it. If we have to look at this position, well, what do you think like would be the general, objectives of this position? We have to look at, I don't know, material, space, pawn structure, king safety, pieces, you know, all the usual here and there ideas. Yeah, usually I've seen that my memory is much better than my searching abilities. Okay. Yeah, exactly. You can already understand what happened there, right? Okay, here we go. So here, here, here. Of course, d4. Okay, this is, of course, there are no queens on the board, but we understand the structure. You know, once I would have said that if Kramnik couldn't win it, no one could win it. But, well, there is this Carlsen dude that makes it kind of not completely true. But in general, look, you know, Adams is such amazing player when it comes to those type of positions. You cannot leave this. But when you play this move, by the way, if the pawn take bishop f6 is immediately, I think, should be the move. But yeah, so we know the pawn is here. They're going to be a blockade. Nothing to discuss much. The other position is a bit different, but at least the idea has to be the same. Okay, back to our game. So what's happening here?
The black king could be weak.
Black king could be weak. That's true. Exactly. Okay, what else?
White's pawn structure is more solid than black's.
Especially this pawn in some situations can be a target, right? Okay. Bishop g4. I mean, yeah, we can consider queen g6. The only thing is that you're not really threatening checkmate. You play bishop d3, I do nothing, you give check, I go here. Then what? You want to play bishop g6? After it, excellent, king e7. You just put your queen on an excellent spot on h7 and no real problems for black. Bishop g4. I think at this moment, if I'm not mistaken, white played 17 moves in a row on light squares. That's unbelievable. 17 moves, let's see, bishop g4, h3, queen d3, rook d1, b3, queen e2. Okay, that's 6, but I think it's 17 or something like that. So black has no targets. Okay, what now? Okay, maybe doing nothing, maybe getting the bishop back. Bishop h5. Now, at some point, here is the question. At some point, and let's, make it like this. In order for white really to create something, which move you will have to play this way or another? You will have to play one move here. No way to not play this move in order to really make effort to win. But this is really difficult because how to defend h4 and it's also, I think it's tiny bit weakening. Well, for certain it's weakening. E4. E4 has to be played because we need to get more squares. If we want one day to go after the king, put the bishop here and say checkmate, and the king will go here, queen h7, king f7. Black is too happy, but if we remove those pawns, no, then it's going to be really checkmated. So we have to open the e file. Now, from just one game, I have like at least 2 different other games of world champions in my head that had similar idea. For example, we will see it quickly after this one. Botvinnik Italy, 1961. Same material, exactly. Bishop, queen, rook, bishop. Well, after e4, somehow the pawn was on d4. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, Botvinnik pawn was on g3. And just strategically lost, black. Just play f4, e5, or some other Fischer-Spassky, when Spassky actually had a knight, but not a bishop, same structure. When e4 and e5 were played. Okay. Bishop d3. This move 8, 9. Queen g4. e4. I mean, it's not bad if you're playing checkers, right? I mean, he only knows one squares. And actually, yeah, the only problem is that those two pieces are not on the light squares. But now, joking aside for a second, you know, when you show those positions to, or in general, the positions with bishop d3 to, let's say, smart kid but beginner, I don't know, 1500. You know, you see so many pieces on the board, but I've heard this comment. They say, oh, it's draw, it's opposite color bishops. You know, that's what they think. This game and many other games, you know, among other things that they teach us one thing. When you're attacking, do you prefer, you're on the side with the initiative and attacking, do you prefer that there will be usually opposite color bishop or bishops on same color?
Opposite.
Why opposite?
They can't defend.
Why? There is nothing to match.
To match
Exactly. There's nothing to match the colors you're playing. Black, you know, it's just incredible, all the light squares and playing on light squares and so on. But black has nothing to match the light squares. Nothing. They are white. So you play this position and you say, okay, I own all the white squares. I own them. And you have this king to start with, and you have those pawns. You know, Ben was saying that, how you call it, the light color symphony, right? You know, there is a reason why we, you know, look at those games 30 years after, and in another 30 years, it will probably still be, well, not probably, it will still be one of the most classical games on light squares. Okay, rook c2, take. Queen e2, rook f1. Now, you know, there is a purpose why I don't stop and we analyze so much. You know, because it will tiny bit miss the target of our lecture. The lecture is to be able to get some ideas from those games. We don't have to analyze every move. Of course, rook f1 is being played because black is threatening something. Rook f2, right? I mean, okay. It's threatening take, bishop e3. Take. Bishop b1. Ah. Queen e5. Probably it was a mouse slip. He wanted to go to e6 and it went to e5. But, joking, no joking, we have been playing here almost 20 moves. And look, black king, does he look weaker than 10 moves ago? It does, because the e file is open. So if we know that one day we might be able to get here, well, we managed to open this file. Doesn't matter where black pawn is and what he's doing. That's not a passed pawn. That pawn is going nowhere. So what is white's most important mission? If he managed to do it, he's probably going to win the game quite quickly. Actually, when he did it, he won the game.
Put the rook at
Yeah, get the rook in the game, because okay, we agreed pretty much. Okay, check is pretty, maybe another check, but no, that's not enough. We need to get this rook somewhere. Bishop c2 is an idea, but then where do you want to go after it? Maybe rook d1, right? And that's a possibility.
Well, the rook should be in the open side.
Yeah, but this is a station to go. Yeah, bishop c2 is definitely a decent move to start. Okay. Yeah. Well, one thing you know about the Russian school in principle, and if I read a little bit about it, and it's interesting. If playing like, why did Karpov have to play this? What does it give him? It doesn't give much. I mean, they passed the time trouble. Let's see. This was move 41. I think that, you know, they almost always say that if you're in total control, repeating moves is kind of like showing that you are completely dominating, the opponent is yours, you know. Sometimes you repeat the position because maybe out of frustration, the opponent might, this is not the situation, because really black has no nowhere to go wrong, right? You either get checkmated or move. But in some situation, you can repeat the position if, well, the opponent might get frustrated and play something that somewhat wrong. I think here it's just a matter of habit. And again, yeah, almost always say just repeat the position if you can. Okay, so we see some idea that just seems very healthy, right? Getting this square mainly for the king, because the king on h2 is not totally safe, right? The black can attack it, black can check it on dark squares, but on g2, the king will pretty much be untouchable. And then this should be an idea. King f8, king g2, queen f6. Now everything is beautiful and perfect what we said, but if we exchange the queens, well, forget about it. Has to go there. Queen f7. Now bishop g6 would be a blunder, right?
Yeah.
Because it will allow queen g8. h4. So after many moves, well, White really did, if you look at this position and the position 30 moves ago, it looks like maybe 5 or 7 moves were played. Not much was happening here. Okay, has to defend. Yeah, now here, why not rook f6? I don't remember exactly, but we will make effort to remember together. I think bishop g6, right? Okay, and after queen g8, I take with the bishop. Okay, now you are looking at this game. Let's take a timeout. You know, you look at this position, each and every one of you. And black play king e7. Okay, is there anyone that king e7 seems very natural move to him? No, not to me also. I don't know if someone king e7 looks natural to him. Well, probably there is a reason for this move. But if you look at the players and you say, all right, you know, this Garry Kasparov is not a very bad player. So there is a reason why he played king e7. There is a reason, right? Because I don't know about you. To me, the first most natural move is to put the rook to fight here. Let's say the book doesn't say it. Or let's say, you know what, you see some analysis, but you want to know. You do the most amazing thing. You turn the book, you take the book, you turn it upside down, and you think.
You turn on Houdini? Ooh, I know. Ooh.
That was, you know, luckily for me, and I'm really saying it luckily, when I was watching those games 20 and a bit years ago, let's say, right? When I was 12, 10, 13, 14, so long time ago. Yeah, there were no Dini, no Fritz, no chess base, no rip, nothing. There was plastic pieces, and like I said, not even an English book. This was my best book, my Karpov game collection, which was in Russian. So I couldn't even easily understand what it means. I understood chess moves and chess language and thinking. So every time there was a position that I said, I turned the book, just not to see the moves and thinking. So we will do the same. I think I have an idea why not rook f6, but I leave it up to you.
Rook e3. Is it because of rook e3?
When?
Fish now.
Now.
G6.
Rook e3. Yeah, that's not bad actually. But that's actually very good.
You can't take, you can't leave the window.
Yeah.
E3 looks like winning.
Rook e3 is probably winning. I was thinking also about this idea here. And if this move, now rook e3. Yeah, but
Isn't it a draw because opposite bishop is fine?
So, when you see something, in general, you follow games of great players. the first assumption should be, no, always, what to do, you know? I did it when I was a young kid, I'm doing it now when I'm Grandmaster, and, you know, okay. Well, there is a reason. They are like really, really smart and strong players. Yes, sometimes they blunder, and, well, it happens to everyone. But usually, well, there has to be a reason for their moves. And usually it is way better reason than our reason for that move. Okay, Queen h8. So this is important. Now the king cannot come back. d4 has to stop rook e3. So maybe, I don't know, rook f4 may be logical, or maybe retreating. What he play? Play first this move. Okay, he wants to give this check. But now it's clear it's over. Rook f6, check. And now rook f4, check. And another one. Threatening checkmate. Oh, that's pretty much it, no? That's it, no? Threatening here, here, here after it. You know, the black has endless amount of lives still being alive in this game, but that's where it's over. So it's a very rare game. And we looked at it, well, I would say even tiny bit quicker than what I wanted. Maybe on the game itself we looked 30 minutes. Usually I would suggest to look, well, especially on such classical games, a bit longer. Why didn't win any material in this game? Nothing. He played opposite color for so many moves. But I don't know, Ben, maybe you know, a better example in chess to demonstrate weakness of light squares in opposite color position. I don't think I know any.
This is the one I use a lot.
This is the one that, yeah, this is, you know, this is the one when you build something, this is the one that you start explaining, looking, understanding why there can be something like this. Now, I mentioned quickly, I'll just show the position.
Chesky game you were talking about. It's really-
Game number 6, exactly.
Really good game.
Exactly. And I mentioned quickly that Botvinnik against Tal from 1961, that actually, if we go to the position where I mentioned it, so basically it was something like this. If we will say, what happens if black plays d4? How should white react? Well, the idea will be that white will want to put his pawns on the dark color. Actually, probably after this move, whenever queen e2, the e5 will have to be played. So let's have a 1 second jump to Tal game. Okay, I'm betting on this one.
Go tall.
No, go Tal. He lost all those games here.
I'm rooting for whoever's Mikhail.
Okay, so quickly, without mentioning anything. Okay, so black is toast here. I mean, it's everything you want. Open file, pair of bishops. Oops. Oh, that's actually amazing, this move, if it jumped there. You know, this position is not so horrible for black. I mean, he's worse here, but amazingly the Tal overlooked, if we are speaking, Tal overlooked this move. Like, yuck.
It's all like me.
Like, yeah, I mean, like, you know, he lived for those things, right? I mean, seriously. So, here we get the light color, blah, blah, blah. And Botvinnik very happy to exchange, okay. So, every possible advantage that white can possess, he has. Pawns, pair of bishops, open file, like, oh, black is lost. But here it is really interesting. There is nothing wrong with, I don't know if you've seen already white's next move, then. There's nothing wrong with, I think, taking the pawn. Oh, you can just take the pawn. Probably black will play c5. Then you can play whatever you want, bishop here or b5. And this is winning also. And there is also this line, that in some situation black will threaten to take and take the bishop, but you should just ignore it, just move the bishop, because those pawns are not important at all. But what to play here? I mean, I think that most of you here, probably including me easily, will take the pawn. Do you remember how he played, Ben?
No, but I saw it.
Ah, okay. But he played exactly like we said before, so it's considered remembering.
You know, I'm hiring a cheap.
Taking is possibility, but we said, right? You said before, not me, that when we have opposite color bishop, if we really can attack, there's nothing to stop the way. So, going back, nothing. I mean, his plan is f4, e5, open the light squares, rook h1, and checkmate. You know, someone was laughing at me. Actually, a strong player, a woman, but very strong player. She was laughing at me that I analyzed one game for chess base, and I said, and in this position, the evaluation is checkmate. So I mean, yeah, that's like, no, okay, here it's the same. It's like, it's not attack, it's not better for white. It's like f4, e5, checkmate. So, okay, he's not joking. Yeah, we have to play d3, I think. But I think also it's doing nothing. Okay, he played that, but it's doing nothing. Take, take, okay, e5, rook h1, queen e4. Yeah, like, that's it. This could have been some idea from the Karpov-Kasparov game. If Kasparov would have played d4, we might have gotten similar structure. Did he resign here? Yeah, just, I don't know, you name it. Like, this is an idea. Okay, so, you know, we have two positions, opposite color bishop, you know, Karpov-Kasparov, this game. They are not taken from online bullet games, which are actually great by themselves. But, you know, most books that you want to see classical games, you will find one of those. You will. Okay, I want to show one tiny idea, game, and before that I will show a quick one, and then how something influenced at least one of my games in a very direct way.